The Stones, like many of their peers, were masters of great production in the studio. In this multi-part series, I love to focus on some of the best productions they have ever put to tape. Now, there might be some songs here that you might not recognize, but hey, that's the point. Maybe we'll learn a couple new things and appreciate the Stones even more. So, without further ado, let's get started. First up, I don't think you could have a list like this without mentioning this particular song. 2,000 Light Years from Home, from 1967's Their Satanic Majesty's Request. This song is sort of legendary among the fan community because it's always been known to be one of their most trippiest songs that they've ever recorded. And it comes off a rather controversial album because of its psychedelic and crazy attributes. But this song in particular is a highlight of the album because they really lean into everything that is so crazy and far out about the 60s. From the moment the song starts up, you know you're in a different place. You're in this weird in-between.
Puts you in a different headspace.
Immediately you're welcomed into the song with these crashes of sound. You've got these piano keys hitting you up front, and then you've got these sound effects, and then the guitar comes in. The guitar is presented in a very contemporary way. You know, if you were to take a listen to Keith's riff on that intro, you wouldn't necessarily place it as it coming from the 60s. It's a little ahead of its time. What's great about this production is that there are so many textures that kind of blend with each other. You've got the fantastic kind of outer space sounds of the strings, which is actually played on the mellotron, which Brian Jones plays on this track. Brian Jones was always the guy who had one foot in the weird and the strange. He really encompassed a lot of the spirit of the 60s, which was to experiment and to push and to, challenge typical songs. And it seemed like this was his playground. And he was the guy who played all the different weird instruments, in this case, the mellotron. And he adds a great texture of this kind of outer space string section that kind of clashes with the very bass and guitar-driven kind of low-end vibe, and it creates this great sandwich of sounds. And it's a little bit like the Stones' Good Vibrations or something, where it's like, it's what planet is this song from? It's not a coincidence that there's a lot going on in the zeitgeist, that people were thinking outside of our normal realm. People were thinking of beyond our limits. And this song is the Stones really exploring and literally taking a rocket ship and going out there. It's a unique production. The vocals are kind of pushed a little bit to the left while you have a large landscape for a lot of the kind of extraterrestrial sounds and stuff. And there's an amazing part where Keith's rhythm guitar is just dripping with distortion and it's hitting it in this bum, 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 bum. Another clash of textures. There's just so many little feels and vibes. It sort of sounds like early Pink Floyd in a way. It's that ahead of its time. All that is kind of crammed into this very short song, and it works very well, and it's great ear candy. It's fun to listen to. Next, we're going to jump way ahead to 1983's Undercover album, and there we're going to find the next song on our list, Undercover of the Night. This song has always sort of been a little under the radar, if you ask me. I mean, considering the Stones' huge catalog and their huge list of singles, it's so easy for a song like this to just kind of fall in the mix. And when it was released, it garnered them a top 10 hit in the US. And nevertheless, I think it's easy for people to dismiss it because it falls into that 80s period where it can be very easy to kind of disregard any music, especially from so-called legacy artists. But I invite you to take another look at this material. It can be very easy to dismiss this song because of its flash. It has a lot of slickness to it, but nevertheless, the production is actually quite intricate and actually, very detailed. On the surface, it gives the impression that it's just a typical 80s sound, but if you dissect it, you'll see that it's actually not as bad as you think. There are electronic embellishments on the track. On first listen, you could assume that the whole drum track is an electronic drum, but it's actually a combination of Charlie accentuated by these electronic drums. The large drum sound, which is usually attributed to the 80s sound, in this case, is attributed to a timpani. So that accounts for the large booming sound of the track. And between the very reserved electronic accents that are being added inside the beat, it's actually a very restrained 80s production. For me personally, I think the song has aged fairly well. Maybe there are other songs that perhaps are more, easy to the ears for a 2023 listener, maybe like Miss You, like I've said before, which those production values I think are still valuable even today. Undercover may fall short of that, but nevertheless, I think people are more sympathetic to a lot of these 80s sounds, considering a lot of those sounds are kind of in vogue again today. Although the song really showcases many of the band members, there's one particular band member that seems to be missing in the fold. From the sound of it, it doesn't appear that Keith appears on the track. He could be playing an acoustic guitar that might be buried, but a lot of the main instruments are being taken care of between Mick, Charlie, Ronnie, and Bill. According to Ronnie, the song had went through many variations in the writing process. Apparently, it was mainly Charlie, Mick, and Ronnie who were really cultivating this song and really building it from the ground up. Ronnie claims that his favorite versions are the early acoustic versions, where it kind of was coming together before Mick took it in a more electronic and flashy production. In fact, when I visited Exhibitionism a few years ago, the traveling museum that the Stones had organized, they had a small kind of mixing board there that was available for visitors to interact with and kind of remix Stones music. And one of the tracks I had available was Undercover of the Night. And I was sort of blown away because as I was creating my own personal mix of the song, I discovered all these acoustic guitars that were buried and not really as audible on the final mix as they were when they originally recorded them. So the song completely transformed into this kind of Street Fighting Man heavy guitar vibe where it had this drive to it that was completely guitar oriented. And it was just fascinating. And anyway, so when I read Ronnie's quote about the early variations of this song, it made me think of what I heard there at Exhibitionism. So it'd be cool to one day hear the outtakes to Undercover, because I think we would be treated to quite a journey with that song.
Hear the screamers in a 42, loud enough to bust the brains out. The opposition's tongues just cut it too. Keep up the street, cause you're in danger. 200,000 disparados lost in the deals in South America. Curl up, baby. Curl up tight. Curl up, baby.
The song itself is actually very exciting because it's really driven by the percussion and the drums. And it's actually not so much a guitar-driven song, much to Keith's disappointment. Keith sort of rolled his eyes at Mick's attempt to kind of pander to current trends. But, credit to Mick. He has to keep the band afloat. And I think we have seen in the past that the bands that don't have that longevity are the ones that kind of stay frozen in time. So Mick knew that the Stones can't afford to just be mired in to old ways, and they would have to adjust. I think they did fairly well. I mean, it could have been worse. The point is, this was already too much for Keith's liking. Nevertheless, the track itself is very exciting to listen to. There are so many things flashing across the screen, so to speak, and attacking you from the front. The main guitar that you're hearing is likely Mick Jagger on rhythm guitar. Keith is, like I said, nowhere to be really found on this track. And Ronnie is doing some great stuff, but mainly as a lead player, really doubling up on the main riff that's doubled by the falsetto doo-doo-doo's vocals. But Ronnie's adding some great tension to it. And like I said, the electronic drums really just add another layer. It's really just frosting to this cake. It's nothing too offensive, really. But aside from that, it's very tame compared to most 80s sounds. It's the Stones with a little bit of an upgrade. All in all, I think the track is very, very strong. And although it might suffer from a little bit of 80s nostalgia, it still, in the end, puts the Stones in a new place and brings them a step forward and takes them out of the whole murky 70s sound even further into a new place, which they needed to go. I mean, the band had no plans to stop, so there's only one way to go if you want to move forward. Next on our list here, we have from 1973's Goat's Head Soup, the song Winter. This one is, you'd have to group together with sort of like Moonlight Mile, which is another song like this one where it's primarily a Mick Jagger, Mick Taylor effort. Keith isn't necessarily part of this song in any way. So with that said, this is one of the Stones' most sweetest productions. Great dynamics, but production-wise really is crafted in a very masterful way. It starts out very, very small with Mick Jagger on rhythm guitar, playing a very full-sounding rhythm guitar with a touch of maybe a chorus to it, but it sounds very, very sweet. It's really a great blend between the guitars and the piano that's happening here. And then as the song continues to build, the strings really come in and really make the song really lift. And right when you think the song can get any higher, we completely take off when Mick Taylor takes over with his lead part at the end. Between the strings and Mick Taylor's solo, you're really soaring through the sky here in this freewheeling kind of sound, and it's truly beautiful and really a great snapshot for dynamics. Some great ebbing and flowing here that really allow the band to really show their chops. The song is designed very, very well and a nice one to put on, especially with headphones. Nick in the song sings about wrapping a coat around you, and that's what this song really is that it's a coat you want to be wrapped around in. It's got such a feel that you just want to stay and dream away in this little world they've created. It's quite a track. By the way, I highly recommend the 2020 version of Goat's Head Soup that they released that was remixed by Giles, or is it Giles Martin. As you know, he has done incredible work with the Beatles catalog in the last few years. Okay, here's one that's completely out of left field, but challenge you to take this one on. This is from 1989 Steel Wheels album, and this one's called Continental Drift. This is really one that no one was expecting. I myself have had a tug of war with the song, but there's no denying that the production on this is absolutely one of a kind and special in the Stones catalog. What they design in this track is really layers and layers of these fantastic Moroccan instruments and voices that really build and build to create this incredible drama. It's great because this harkens back to a lot of what the Stones were doing in the 60s. We were talking about Brian Jones earlier, but this is a track that really Brian Jones would have been all about had he survived and been around for this album in 1989. This song really is attributed to Brian Jones. According to Mick, Brian had a lot of these kind of Moroccan influences and enjoyed a lot of the flavors that were coming out of that region and was working with a lot of these instrumentations and these sounds. And so this was sort of a going back to that. According to Keith, Mick was working on a song on keyboard, and that main riff that drives the song was just floating in the room. And Keith said, that sounds like Morocco. Next thing you know, they were off. The Stones took the song very seriously and eventually traveled to work with the famous musicians, master musicians of Jajouka. I hope I'm saying that right. But it's those musicians that really make the song feel more authentic and genuine. And as a whole, the song itself has many, many colors and textures, In the beginning, we hear this scraping sound, which makes you wonder, what on earth is that instrument? What could that be? It's actually Keith using a knife blade and scraping across the spokes of a bicycle wheel. It's a very exotic sounding track with a lot of things moving across the screen, and it's completely engaging. So with that, it harkens a lot of the experimentation that the Stones did in the 60s, and it's really cool to see them do that in their later career in 1989. The great dynamics and the drama in the song, because of the swirling instruments and the way they've layered the different elements together, really puts us in a very unique, special place. There's no other piece of music in their catalog like it, and that's what makes this song very, very special. And finally on this list, we go back to 1971 to Sticky Fingers, where we're going to find the song Sister Morphine. This one is really what prompted me to think about the Stones' best productions, because this song really is a special one for me because of what they've built here. The design on this is really, really effective and powerful. Recorded beautifully. The acoustic guitars on this track just shine and ring through. And it's a very sparse track. I mean, there isn't really much here between the acoustic guitar, the piano, the drums, and the bass, and the slide. They're attacking the song in a very delicate way where they're not really overwhelming the whole song. What's great about the arrangement and production of this song is a little bit like Winter. There are periods of light and darkness going on here. There are moments where it's a rather small production, where it's just Mick and Keith on the acoustic guitar, and a very eerie, mysterious opening. And then there are moments where the song kind of erupts, and you go into the wild ride of what it's like to be under the influence and being in the throes of a morphine, a nightmare. Great combination here between the acoustic guitars. It's so obvious that it's Keith on the acoustic guitar because of its very idiosyncratic kind of original strumming pattern that is focused. Keith has a lot of personality in his playing, and to hear him strumming through that brings this excitement to the song that kind of makes you at the edge of your seat a little bit. But the best moments are when the slide guitar interacts with the vocal and with Keith's acoustic guitar, which is played by Ry Cooder, an amazing guitar player in his own right. It's his slide parts on this song that really elevate the song into a different place, that really create this tension in the song between Mick Jagger's vocal and the slide. They're almost having this conversation, and the slide really adds this wonderful color to the song that really opens up the mystique and the otherworldness of really what's going on the dark side of all this stuff. What's also special about this track is that Bill Wyman, who usually plays the bass with a pick, plays Sister Morphine with his thumb on his very first bass. He mentioned that the bass he plays on this track was his very first bass, which was sort of a fretless bass, which allowed him to slide up and down the neck, which gives it a very special flavor as well. One of my favorite elements of the song is the way the piano is mixed. At first, when the piano makes its entrance, you don't even recognize it as a piano. It's mixed and distorted in a way that it's very nightmarish, which is what, perfect for the song. But it's almost like chimes or bells or something. It's got this very steel quality, and it's kind of radiating in the back, and you can barely hear it, but it's so provocative and makes you lean into the song even closer, because you're just like, what is that? And then eventually it's presented in a more fuller way. And then when the song kind of erupts, Charlie tumbles in with those drum fills and the song is off. And all the instruments kind of bounce off each other. And it's a great design of dynamics and layers. It's really produced in a way where it's really layered, really intricately, and everything fits without it clashing with the other. Yeah, and as the song builds, it's sort of like a puzzle kind of piecing together, because each layer that comes in adds to the drama of the song. And at the end, you're sort of overwhelmed into this dark nightmare that you just want it to be over, just like the singer is hoping for. Okay, so that wraps up part 1 of the Stones' best productions. I have so many more songs I'd like to talk about, but we won't have time to do it all in one sitting, so there'll be more videos to come in this series. For now, are there any songs that you think should be on this list? Well, let me know in the comments below. Until then, we'll see you next time.